What's going on, Pinnacle students? Coming at you here with your message for this week. Hey, we're going to be talking about something that's kind of heavy, and that is probably something that a lot of you are going through right now, and that is painful or difficult situations. Listen, everyone on earth right now is facing a new, difficult, painful, awkward situation in life, and that's okay. And I don't want to diminish the fact of those situations are crappy and they suck, but not to pull away from that and what you're going through. But I want to talk to you this week about how God can use these bad situations in our life, these painful times, for good. And I know you're like, oh, Walker, well, that's just the stereotypical Christian thing of oh, well, you can get through this, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it is. And as cheesy as that sometimes seems to those of us that have maybe grown up in church since we were little, we can overcome anything because of our hope in Christ, but it doesn't diminish the pain that we're going through. And so you got to acknowledge that pain first and acknowledge the situation that you find yourself in. Sometimes we get a little too much, and this is the thought that goes through our head. We ask, why? Why is this happening to me? Maybe if you believe in God, you're like, God, why would you let this happen to me? Why would this occur? I just don't understand. And yeah, we may not understand, and it's okay to maybe ask why, but we have to transition from asking, why did God let this happen to me, to, God, what can I do in this situation? See, when we're asking, why did this happen to me, we're being selfish. We're only being concerned about ourselves. We're not seeing what we can do for other people, what we can do for God in this situation. But when we ask, what can I do? We're looking at how we can have an impact even when everything around us is falling apart. And so when you don't know what to do, that's what we're going to be looking in today, is what to do when your world is falling apart or you are in a painful situation. And so we've been following the story of We've been following the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis. I was trying to combine Joseph and Genesis together there. And to just catch us up a little bit, Joseph was the chosen one of his family. His brothers hated him, sold him into slavery. Joseph was a servant to the Pharaoh. That was going great, but then he got accused of a crime that he didn't commit, and so Joseph is in jail where we're picking up here. So let's see what goes on. Something happens in Genesis 40, verse 1 through 3. Let's see what happens here. He says, sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with the two officials, the cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. All right, so we've got a cupbearer and a baker. They've ticked off their master and they've thrown him into prison. Joseph is there with them in prison. Let's continue on and see what happens in verses 4 through 8. So he says, after they've been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night. And each dream had a meaning of its own. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked the Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, why do you look so sad today? We both had dreams, they answered, but there is no one to interpret them. Then Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. Let's just fill this in, okay? So first here we're seeing in the Old Testament, Joseph had a spiritual gift to interpret dreams from God. So these two homies get thrown into prison with Joseph. Joseph is like, hey, how's it going, new roomies? And they're like, it's okay. And then the next morning they're like, we had a dream. And Joseph's like, cool, let me interpret that dream for you. And you're like, okay, cool. Now, Walker, how does any of this tie in to being in a crappy situation? All right. I'm wondering why I'm in a crappy situation and you're not telling me anything. Instead, you're telling me this crazy story about a dude that carried a cup and a dude that ate bread. Okay. Or made bread. I guess he ate bread too. Most bakers eat bread? Imagine being a baker, but you're gluten intolerant. How awful would that be? Anyways, Joseph's in this crappy situation. He's in prison. No one likes being in prison, okay? I think we can unanimously agree that prison not great. So Joseph is innocent and in prison, but these two guys come. Now, here's the significance of the situation. Later on, the Pharaoh has a dream, but he needs someone to interpret them. These two guys forgot about Joseph. The Pharaoh had pretty much forgotten about Joseph. He's just chilling in prison, chilling like a villain on some penicillin, and that could have been the end of it. But he interpreted these two guys' dreams. So later on, when these servants are serving the master, the cupbearer, he remembers who interpreted his dream. And so Joseph actually gets to go and interpret the Pharaoh's dream, and there's a lot of lasting stuff that happens from that. And we can get into a million different things, but what I want to look at here is Joseph ended up setting up to save his family and to save a lot of Egypt because he was in prison. Joseph was in prison and was willing to still honor God and love God, which he did while he was in prison. And because of that, he asked what he could do, not why me. He was able to interpret those people's dreams, and then that led to interpreting the Pharaoh's dream. Joseph did something in his situation, in his circumstance, that led to greater good, that led to greater good for his family and saving them. And we'll get more into this next week about how Joseph did this and how God used Joseph to bring redemption back to this situation. But we have to look in at this and just imagine the impact. I mean, just really imagine the impact, guys, if you asked what you could do in the circumstances that you find yourself in right now. Maybe you're in a situation where your parents are divorcing or fighting, or there's financial struggles in your family, or you've not got to see your friends and you're just struggling really hard with maybe some loneliness, maybe some depression. First, I encourage you to reach out to us, send us a message. We have amazing small group leaders that want to connect with you and just talk things through with you. So I want to throw that out there first. But secondly, especially if you are a believer in Christ, what can you do in this situation? What can you do? Because like I said, just because we love God and we want to honor Him, that does not mean that everything's going to be hunky-dory and peachy. But we can have an impact. Jesus says He's the light of the world. And when He's talking about that, it's this picture of everything is really dark. But Jesus comes in and shines a light on it to reveal, to give guidance and peace. And we're called to be Christ to our neighbors. And that means everyone on earth. So what can each of us do in any situation to shine light, to help someone, to be there for someone? Because we don't know the lasting effects of that. Listen, you may never see, Joseph got to see the sort of fruit of his labor, so to speak. But sometimes you may never see. You may never actually get to reap the benefits of following God in a situation like that. But that's okay, because we're not doing it to get benefits, we're doing it to honor God. And there's a big difference there. John tells us that he wants to make less and less of himself to be more like Christ. And that's what we have to strive to do. We have to strive to make less and less of ourselves so that we can be more and more like Christ. And then we stop looking at things through the lens of ourselves and how it's benefiting us and woe is me, and more of, well, hey, what can I do? How can I help? And I firmly believe that if everyone started doing that and looking past themselves and experience the radical love of Christ through us, things would be a lot different. Things would be very different in our world. But here's the thing. Each of us can start. Each of us can start doing this with our family, with our siblings, our cousins, our neighbors, our legitimate neighborhood neighbors. Some of you guys, you're about to go to school and that's going to be really weird, going partially some days, and then other days you're not. What can you do to help other people? What can you do to help your teachers? You know, this is stressful for them just as much as it's stressful for you. What are you going to do to help your parents? It's stressful for them when they're like, okay, cool, I'm going to have these kids at home every other week. What can you do? And even if you find yourself now, maybe you're facing some depression or some struggles, what can you do to maybe help someone else that's facing that? Also get help yourself. Maybe that's something, rather than asking, why do I feel this way? What you can do is to go and seek help. Paul says for us to actually seek out the guidance of doctors and medicine and help. So guys, holler at us in DMs if you want to continue on any conversations. We would love to have that. If you want to get connected, maybe you're not connected with a small group leader yet, hey, send us a DM, comment below. We'd love to get you connected with some of our amazing team here at Pinnacle Students to get you connected in and feel a part of the Pinnacle Students family.